These are some of the worst NBA fall-offs, starting with D'Lo, who's officially a one-hit wonder. Now, D'Lo had one magical run with the Brooklyn Nets that got him paid for a career, but since leaving that team, it looks like D'Lo has had ass in his veins. Did D'Angelo Russell just get worse at basketball? Was he ever even that good to begin with? Or did global warming melt the ice running through him? Well, the answer is more complicated than you may think. At 22 years old on the Brooklyn Nets, D'Angelo Russell had a breakout season averaging 21 points and 7 assists on 43% from the field and 37% from three-point range. Now this was great to see, as starting his career in the Los Angeles Lakers, D'Lo really did not look too great whatsoever. I mean, barely shooting over 40% from the field with under 2 assists per turnover, while being one of the worst defensive points in the NBA. The Lakers didn't see a future in this guy very early on, but what they didn't see was very clear for Kenny Atkinson. I mean, flat out, Kenny is one of the best coaches in the NBA, and doesn't even have to be at the head coach position. Atkinson got his first chance at head coaching on a very young and very poor Nets squad because he was clearly the right man for the job. Through other positions as an assistant coach, primarily with guards, Atkinson had a reputation of being a phenomenal developmental coach. From Jeremy Lin in New York to Jeff Teague in Atlanta and then eventually D'Angelo Russell in Brooklyn, numerous guards that had otherwise pretty average careers had very high peaks under Atkinson's leadership, with numerous players over the years praising what he can do for a player's career. Atkinson turned multiple teams he's touched into gold. First with his 2019 Nets squad that massively overperformed, climbing from 28 to 42 wins. As an assistant coach, he went on to do the same thing with the Warriors in 22 as Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins broke out of the shells in a very major way as well. You can argue correlation versus causation, as there's of course multiple factors moving around and a new face on the bench doesn't guarantee success or improvement, but I've been a big believer that this guy not having a head coaching job from 2020 to 2024 was a massive miss for loads of teams. And now that he's turned the Cleveland Cavaliers from a team that was struggling with some major fit and chemistry issues into the best team in basketball on his way to what looks like a Coach of the Year season, he's only solidified his reputation even more. Now that's enough glazing of a head coach for a video, but I'm trying to explain to you, before the Cavaliers of this season, Atkinson already had a masterpiece of a season under his belt, and that was this 2019 Nets team on the back of D'Angelo Russell. The team had some moderately good role players like Joe Harris torching 3 balls, Karis LeVert, Alan Crabb, Damari Carroll, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, and a young Jared Allen, as well as Spencer Dinwiddie being a damn good creator off the bench. D'Angelo Russell wasn't exactly expected to come in and start running the show in the way that he did as far as I know, but with a lack of creators on the team, D'Lo took the keys to the offense and he made for one exciting ass team. With a good role man and shooters surrounding him, Russell was great with the ball in his hands. He's always been a good and a quick playmaker. The ball doesn't stick in his hands overly long when he's looking to facilitate, but when he's looking to score, things get very interesting. Russell's offensive game is heavily crippled due to him being one of the least athletic guards in the NBA. What kept his game afloat is that this guy was one of the best tough shot makers in the NBA, and this is what made this team so fun. That all these years later, even after all the superstar talent, Net fans are still talking about fucking D'Lo. I mean, D'Angelo Russell did go nuclear this year, and with his scoring output increasing, the floor opened up for him to facilitate more efficiently. Russell was playing with extraordinary confidence that fueled him to stay on top, and really was the primary reason that these Nets were so overachieving. Was D'Lo a little overrated at the time? It's surely possible depending on who you're talking to, but nonetheless he was surely deserving of being an injury replacement in the All-Star game and deserving of a lot of recognition he received because he was a damn effective player. After his best year in the league to date, Russell would take his talent to the injured Warriors, who were basically taking a year off playing G-Leaguers around Russell, where for a short time we would basically see prime D'Angelo Russell. While not having a lick of talent around him, Russell would have major scoring bombs averaging 23 a game, including a 52-point explosion this year, before being moved to Minnesota mid-season. Playing alongside his buddy in Karl Anthony Towns really seemed to be a pretty good fit. Russell was never great attacking downhill, but a floor spacer like Cat would help to mitigate his weakness, hopefully get him some easier buckets because given his slow foot speed, he had to work his ass off to get the buckets he was getting, and would give him his best roster to date with a chance to win. But that wasn't even close to the case in Minnesota. With Anthony Edwards coming in, he was kind of given the green light over D'Lo, to where Russell's role was significantly altered. Due to conflicts in play style, this guy who was an all-star just a couple years before was being benched for Ricky Rubio, because his game was more fit for the direction that the Wolves chose to go. His time in Minnesota should have lined up with the time frame as he was entering his prime, but rather was a clear drop-off from his Nets days and his short stint in Golden State. He wasn't constantly getting to take the shots that he was taking in Brooklyn, and as a result, his confidence was hindered, and his stats fell to 18 a game on just over 40 and 34% shooting splits. Now, these weren't bad numbers, but Anthony Edwards took this dude's job, flat out. D'Lo's ceiling as a player was very clear to see, given that his playmaking wasn't top-notch, and his athleticism was rather unimpressive. This guy is trying to make a career as a high-volume, slow-footed, tough shot taker and maker, and as exciting as that can be to watch at times, especially given how smooth his ball handling is, it makes more sense to build around a guy like Edwards because he can just flat out do so much more with the ball in his hands. The Timberwolves stint did seem to kill this dude's confidence, and I get it, man. He didn't feel at home on this team, as he would admit after being moved back to LA, but I mean, it's hard to really knock anyone in this situation. It's hard to utilize D'Lo to the best of his ability. Someone who has a lot of trouble getting easy buckets is bound to have a lot of bad nights, and that's exactly what D'Lo has. He's inconsistent just because where his shots come from. Off the dribble and contested looks are makeable in his arsenal, just not every night. And as his confidence took a hit, this guy was never going to get back to his Nets form because that was such a crucial element of his game. D'Lo would go on to be the scapegoat of the Lakers, where for the most part his game declined pretty heavily. Despite having some good scoring nights here and there, the inconsistencies in his play resulted in him being crucified. And now as more young talent comes into the league, there's very limited need for a player of Russell's abilities as the years add up. Frankly, I don't think we're going to see more than a couple more years of Russell's talents in the NBA. So, what really happened to this guy? Well, as we explained here, all the stars aligned to Brooklyn for him. This guy got on a roll and stayed on it, for a team that was in desperate need of playmaking and shot creation. I don't necessarily think that his stats were empty as they translated to a lot of wins, but given his holes as a player, I don't think that there was a ton of room to grow here even if this was at his age 22 season, and there weren't many NBA teams that he could have recreated this, if any at all. D'Lo is one of those guys who kind of was destined to have an early prime, but it still wasn't quite as early as Michael Carter-Williams. Now, Michael Carter-Williams had a pretty consistent statistical fall-off reaching his peak in his rookie season. Hell, this dude's best game in the league was his debut with 22 points, 7 rebounds, 12 assists, and 9 steals, marking the name Michael Carter-Williams as the best NBA debut in history. Williams was a bit of a do-it-all, tall, athletic guard that specialized when it came to facilitating, pushing in transition, and was a good to a very good defensive player at his best. But no output matched his rookie average of 17 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists with 2 steals again in his career, or really anything close to that. Williams is a bit of a mystery buried deep in NBA lore, with the hype and potential that came with earning the most significant award a rookie can earn. It only seemed to bury Williams for the rest of his career. So what exactly happened that rookie season? Well, Williams did put up good totals, and yes, that debut game was pretty legendary. But all in all, many of the criticisms that he was receiving were very valid and proved to be killers of his career. Williams was a part of what was one of the worst draft classes in recent history, with Anthony Bennett topping it off, a flurry of buzz throughout the lottery, and the only player saving it being Giannis, who was a total draft steal who wouldn't be realized until a few years into his career. When looking back at how he won the award, nothing is given in the NBA. He did deserve a Rookie of the Year this season, but his competition was only Victor Oladipo. It just wasn't a great class, and MCW had to be the face of it. Now with that came added pressure, that Williams said added up on his shoulders very quickly. It's no secret that with awards and recognition comes a target on your back. Players are going to come with a different energy towards you, and the world expects a whole lot from you. But this shouldn't be a problem for a guy who just put up 17, 6, and 6 with NBA all-defensive potential, right? Well, although the frame and versatility in his game screams endless potential, there was very clear signs that his output wasn't what it looked like to be on paper, and you really didn't even have to dig very deep to see it. The first glaring weakness of his game was his awful efficiency and high usage rate inflating his stats. At 40% from the field and 26% from 3, he was extremely inefficient. And with a pretty high 25% usage rate on the 19-win Sixers squad, these stats were especially empty. Now it feels weird knocking a rookie for empty stats because most rookies honestly put up empty stats, but in Williams' case, he was playing such an inefficient brand of basketball that it was crippling his game entirely. Firstly, at 26% from deep, this guy couldn't shoot. and actually slightly regressed, shooting 25% from deep for his career. This guy was just a non-shooting threat all in all, and at around 55% at the basket, he wasn't an efficient player anywhere on the floor, as once he stepped out beyond 3 feet, his efficiency instantly plummeted towards the mid-30% mark, and remained there for the rest of his career. His inability to score really shrunk the floor for him. No matter how talented of a passer you may be, if you're not a threat to score yourself, you're significantly easier to stop. So, okay, sure, the rookie season wasn't as strong as some may remember it, but how in all these years did Williams not develop? Williams was drafted at 22 years old, to where his prime was much closer than other rookies. This was very easy to tell in Williams' case, as physically this guy was faster and more physically matured than other rookies in his class and other young guys you see around the league. Seeing the holes with his game, and seeing that he had less time to fill them than you would like, Philadelphia did not see a future in Williams and moved him to Milwaukee in just his second year after winning the damn Rookie of the Year award. In Williams' words, this trade took a toll on him mentally. For starters, he thought he was the key piece of Philadelphia's rebuild like they had been telling him, but clearly, they did not see the potential in him and just lied to his face. Ethics in basketball don't always go hand in hand, but what made it worse is that the fit in Milwaukee was especially bad, with 4 starters shooting under 30% from 3 in Jabari Parker, Giannis, Williams, and Greg Monroe. These guys were basically shoulder to shoulder rim running all game. The acquisition of Williams wasn't perfect on paper or anywhere close, but coach Jason Kidd saw a lot of his younger self in Williams, which definitely makes sense. That doesn't necessarily mean you should acquire him, but Kidd saw talent he wanted to develop because he felt he was seeing the opportunity where others didn't. The problem was that no matter how bad he wanted him to be Jason Kidd, Michael Carter Williams was still Michael Carter Williams. Their relationship did not mesh, as Kidd didn't have the sort of patience and temperament necessary for a project player like this. And given the situation, the strained relationship with his new team after his first team abandoned him, and his declining production in the NBA, Williams began to struggle with significant mental health struggles that followed him throughout his career. These issues would only worsen with his declining play, with 11, 5, and 5 averages in his second year with Milwaukee, to where his confidence was in shambles, and he could not figure out how to score on an NBA floor. Carter would be moved to Chicago the following year, where in just the stretch of bad luck, more locker room issues would occur involving the whole team. At this point, Williams was in a free fall. His scoring struggles from all of the floor didn't improve at any point in his career, and although he was working as hard as he could, eventually reaching a point where he was a very good defender, he was never really given a chance to develop on a new team, and with his poor results came declining confidence that you definitely don't want to see out of a guy who can't take the lid off the hoop. I mean, I feel pretty bad for this guy all around. The exaggerated hype from winning the award definitely made his career feel like more of a disappointment than it was, and due to some bad team situations and mental health struggles that ran in his family, he really had a tough time in the league, man. Although it certainly feels like there's a world out there where Michael Carter Williams gave us a lot more than he did in the NBA, a 9-year career is a lot more than most people can say they've accomplished. Carter Williams never reached star status or anywhere close, but that can definitely not be said about Kemba Walker. For a long time, Kemba Walker was the only thing that kept Charlotte basketball exciting, and before he eventually went over to fill as a major piece on the Boston Celtics, Kemba was a 26-point per game scorer standing under 6 feet tall. From the years 2011 to 2016, or his first 5 seasons in the NBA, Kemba put together a solid 17 points per game, albeit on a very shaky 40% from the field. This guy had a world of talent as he already put on an absolute show at UConn throughout his college career, but when he arrived in the NBA, he proved a few things but left a few questions. Kemba was ultra talented and ultra exciting due to his insane quickness, elite handle on the ball, and an ability to make tough shots. Kemba Walker was no doubt a good player, but throughout 5 years was really just a shot chucker on a bad team, that had he played on a good team, would likely be a 6th man or some sort of spark plug role of the sort. He could create shots and score, no doubt about it, and at 33% from 3 was a capable 3-point shooter. But similar to D'Lo, Kemba had a problem in that he had struggles getting easy buckets. As a 5'11" guy, or maybe 6 foot flat on a good day, Kemba didn't have a great interior presence, and didn't have the exterior shooting to make up for it while being a score-first guard. Guys like Isaiah Thomas were able to make a living at an even shorter height in the NBA, but the way they manufactured points made all the difference. IT was a stronger player who could embrace contact and finish like crazy at the basket, or get to the line while also having the best floater in the NBA. Kemba throughout his first 5 years was chucking shots in no man's land, while upwards of 25% of his shot attempts were deep twos, where he shot a pretty poor 39%. By all measures, Kemba's career looked to have two outlooks at this point. He could continue to put up pretty empty stats in Charlotte before the age of analytics exposed his poor play and crumbled his career, or he could evolve alongside it. And by the 2016-2017 season, Kemba Walker was a whole new player. Shooting 39% from 16 feet out is pretty shitty, but shooting 39% from deep makes you an all-star. Kemba's game was slightly refined at that time where a guard in California was changing the game, and Kemba Walker proved he could fit the modern NBA like a glove. At his peak, he was shooting 28% of his looks from just inside the three-point line. Now cutting that down to 14% and chucking way more three balls greatly increased his scoring and efficiency numbers, putting up 23, then 22, then 25.6 points per game in 3 consecutive All-Star seasons with the Hornets. These were some of the funnest years in Charlotte's history, as the city should probably be thanking him for keeping the lights on. I mean, I loved Kemba, he was loyal to his small market team, stayed out of any trouble, seemed to only ever bring good energy everywhere he went, and made for some incredibly entertaining play in his years in Charlotte. And had Jordan been able to get him some talent around him, maybe this thing could have went somewhere, because they were in desperate need of it. At his best, he was a 25-plus point per game scorer on 56% true shooting while being a pretty underrated defender. All in all, at his best, this guy was a no-brainer all-star that just needed some help. So when he packed his bags for Boston, not even Charlotte fans could be mad at him for giving them all that he could. During his first season with the Celtics, Kemba was proving that on any team, in any system, he was a legit star. However, sadly this year would also mark his downfall. Sharing the ball with 4 double-digit scorers and 2 20-point scorers in the Celtics wing duo, Kemba still managed to put up 20 a game in an all-star season. It wasn't too often that we got to see Walker in the playoffs. When we did, there was no drop-off to his play. Playing under Brad Stevens, who had already worked some magic with IT in 2018, he had no problem putting Kemba to fantastic use. But after this point, knee injuries started to be a reoccurring trend, often taking him off the floor in spurts. By the time this guy hit about 31 years old, with a few injuries under his belt, Walker's production fell from 19 a game in his second year in Boston down to 12. Very quickly, when you take a small guard's quickness away, his career is over. And that's exactly what happened as his contract expired at 32 years old. Kemba's falloff wasn't really a mystery, it was super obvious to witness. We're going to try to stray away from collapses stemming from injury for the remainder of the video, but due to the fact that this dude was so underrated when at his best, and his falloff was so quick, seeing videos of him coaching LaMelo Ball right now might hit you with a quick shock if you didn't realize he was playing with no knees. Now, Kemba Walker's downfall didn't take too much to analyze, but Tyreke Evans, on the other hand, is a much more complicated case. Now, Tyreke Evans was something special. He often got tied into the same discussions as Michael Carter-Williams, but really Tyreke was quite a few levels above Williams as a player, while also getting tied in with OJ Mayo as a guy who was super hyped entering the league, then disappointed in front of all of us due to his own self-sabotage. But let me explain why that isn't exactly the case either. Now, compared to Williams, Evans wasn't a part of a terrible rookie class. In fact, he was a part of a generational one. After a legendary 33-4 season at Memphis, Tyreke was drafted 4th overall in 2009, just behind future All-Stars in James Harden and BG, and before guys like Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, Drew Holiday, and Jeff Teague. The class was stacked from top to bottom, with of course the best player in the class in Steph Curry, coming out gunning, putting up 17.5 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals a night, on 46% shooting and 43% from deep, only to be the pretty clear number 2 for Rookie of the Year behind Tyreke Evans. Putting up 20.5 points, 6 assists, and 5 boards, Tyreke was your consensus Rookie of the Year this season, and it wasn't even that controversial. Evans was an athletic 6'6" point guard that was best in the open floor with the ball in his hands, because this guy was incredibly physically gifted for being just a rookie. Kobe Bryant went as far to say he played like a grown man, which surely is worth a lot, as a guy who wasn't exactly willing to toss around a ton of compliments towards his competition. Now, Tyreke had basically one hole in his game, and that was his 3-point shot at 25%. He couldn't shoot that bitch whatsoever. But nonetheless, he was a willing and capable mid-range shooter and a 75% free throw shooter, so his ceiling was extremely high for Tyreke across the board. Tyreke Evans looked like the future of the Kings, and the correct pick at the time, before shockingly in 2010, the Kings went 2 for 2 with the selection of Boogie Cousins. Now, This duo could have and should have been something really special. Tyreke with a dominant big like DeMarcus Cousins was a match made in heaven, it felt like, given the two's ability to pass at their size being very elite. With their point guard of the future and the big man to pair, this was a fantastic start of a rebuild. But this is where things began to get funky. Early in the season, Tyreke was diagnosed with plantar fasciitis and began to start a trend of lower body injuries that we would see flare up throughout his career. Now, I know we said that we were going to stray away from careers that were derailed by injuries, but stay with me for just a minute because there was way more to the Tyreke saga than that. Now, Tyreke and Boogie had a little year together as Tyreke's numbers would slightly decline to 18, 6, and 6 due to having to share the ball a bit more, and a slow comeback after a midseason foot injury. But this offseason is where things began to get weird. Now, the Kings I really think believed in Tyreke, but I don't think they really believed in his vision of himself. Tyreke was a very ball-dominant guard that was more of a point guard in a big two guard's body, but the Kings were still clearly looking up to fill up on guards in the 2011 draft. Now, the Kings made some bad decisions that began in the 2011 draft, trading for Jimmer Fredette. Now, although Jimmer Fredette was a guard and would be further taking some touches away from Tyreke, that would force a bad shooter in Tyreke to play off the ball a bit more, but to give them some credit, Tyreke and Jimmer in theory wouldn't have been that bad of a guard pairing. Jimmer was kind of a shooting guard in a point guard's body, which of course works fine with Tyreke, as Evans could take over typical point guard duties offensively while guarding the opposing teams too. And Jimmer would be totally fine playing off ball since he wasn't all that ball dominant for his position. The Kings did find their point guard of the future this draft, but that of course was not Jimmer Fredette, whose talents did not live up to the hype. But Isaiah Thomas, drafted 60th overall, was certainly much better than anticipated. IT was instantly a double-digit scorer, and by his third season was a 20-point scorer. This fit certainly wasn't as good as the hypothetical matchup of Jimmer Fredette, if he didn't shit his pants the second he got into the NBA. But as Tyreke's usage would fall from 26 to 22%, his production would consistently fall to 16 and 15 points per game. It was clear that Tyreke was being played out of position, as when he didn't have the ball in his hands, he was rather ineffective. Some injuries definitely had an effect on his athletic development, but at over 15 points per game on 48% and 34% shooting splits, Tyreke was still quite the talent. It's just hard when you're a point guard sharing the ball with a score-first point guard. The Kings really did not manage Tyreke's career too well at all. After the relationship had soured, the Kings decided to move on from the Tyreke Evans saga. Moving him to New Orleans was the end of that mess and the beginning of another. Tyreke had quite a bit of talent that was very easy to see, and the pairing with AD on paper should have been even better than the pairing of DeMarcus Cousins. But again, slapping out on the wing as he was sharing the floor with Drew Holiday and Eric Gordon meant that Tyreke was once again playing quite a bit off the ball. Tyreke wasn't happy with his role in New Orleans, as his up and down production at around 15 points per game during his 4 years there was still a shortcoming to his production in his rookie season that he had yet to live up to. As injuries arose in the Pelicans in his first season, this allowed Evans to take over the team a bit more. We would see him blossom a bit before again either being forced out of his role or a lower body injury would keep throwing off his momentum. It was frustrating to watch, and for Tyreke it was frustrating to deal with, as he would frequently collide with Coach Monty Williams over the way he fit into their system. Again, the fit in New Orleans really wasn't working before he would be moved again, but rather than finding a new home he could fit in, the Pelicans just moved this guy straight back to the Kings. As the awkward season, with Evans battling injuries and having a major down year at just 11 points per game, there was one major sign that great things were coming in Tyreke's future. In the 14 games that Evans played back in Sacramento, he shot a staggering 44% from three-point range, which had been a major hole holding him back his entire career. Now at just 28 years old, who really still hadn't gotten the chance in the league despite having a world of talent, Tyreke was really on his last legs. He was playing a bench role on a terrible Memphis Grizzlies squad after being traded again from Sacramento, but really after quite a few injuries, Tyreke was not the athlete he once was. Things were looking bleak, but that was until an injury to Mike Conley completely rejuvenated the career of Tyreke Evans. Now for the first time since his rookie year, the offense was running through Evans, and boy did he shine. At 19 points, with 5 rebounds and 5 assists per night, Evans was looking like his rookie form, but honestly, he was a significantly better player than he was in his rookie season. Evans kept his momentum going from the season prior and shot a staggering 40% from behind the arc this season, completely shattering that 25% from his rookie year. Everything was going right for this guy. He proved that it really was a mistake the way this guy was being utilized and made himself a major impact player in the process. The Grizzlies had found out how to make Tyreke Evans look like the star he was supposed to be. The only problem was they didn't want him to be this good. In an attempt to tank away the games, the Grizzlies made it very apparent that they were going to trade Tyreke while he was still playing so well, and even sat him before the deadline before finding a trade. And as the deadline passed, the Grizzlies passed on every single trade opportunity, forcing themselves to stick with their star guard, who they didn't even want, playing him sparingly for the remainder of the season. I mean, this shit just had to suck, dude. Throughout his whole career, Evans really seemed to be mismanaged at every system he went to. By the time he signed with the Pacers in 2018, the momentum he had in Memphis had completely died. Now, this was the real fall off of his career. After a strong rookie season, Evans had gradually declined in production as his usage and playing time would decline as well. But after a major resurgence with the Memphis Grizzlies, Tyreke Evans was clearly playing like total shit on the Pacers. At 10 points per game and 2.4 assists on barely over a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio while shooting 39% from the field, the world was wondering what the hell happened to Tyreke Evans. He was rather healthy, playing 69 games and had the ball in his hands at an even higher rate than his rookie season, but really just fell off a cliff entirely. What happened? Well, after the season, we may have gotten our answer, as Tyreke Evans would very randomly be banned from the NBA for violating their drug policy, effectively ending his career. I mean, what the absolute hell, man. Tyreke had a wild run in the NBA that really had so many moving parts of dysfunction. It seemed that every team he was on really did not believe in the Tyreke Evans experiment, and after a decade of bouncing around poorly managed teams, frequently battling injuries and doing drugs, the guy was flat out banned. I mean, I was always high on Tyreke, no pun intended. This dude had a very high ceiling and also had a very high floor, which made him always a pretty solid contributor throughout his entire career. And although we never saw the best out of Evans' career, he certainly had a run in the NBA that would be hard to group with anyone else in league history. Now, Jahlil Okafor certainly had a story unique to him as well, as the big man definitely didn't disappoint entering the league. Rather, the league decided that the man who was once the top prospect was no longer needed. After solidifying his legacy as one of the most polished post scorers in NCAA history, averaging 17 points, 8.5 boards, and shooting 66% from the field, he became the anchor of a Duke team that won the 2015 national championship alongside Justice Winslow and Tyus Jones. Okafor was an unstoppable force in the paint, earning ACC Player of the Year honors and outshining almost every other collegiate player that season. For much of the year, he was the consensus favorite to go first overall in the NBA draft. However, a new era of basketball was beginning to take shape, and Okafor's style of play was quickly falling out of favor. The rise of the defending champion Golden State Warriors and their perimeter-oriented pace and space offense shifted the league's focus away from interior dominant big men towards versatile players who could shoot, facilitate, and defend multiple positions. Even though Okafor was widely regarded as the best player in college basketball, his inability to stretch the floor, his brutally slow feet that would get destroyed in the modern spread pick and roll, and his inability to operate in a modern offense due to his poor shooting, poor court vision, and bad rim running ability became glaring weaknesses for NBA scouts. Karl Anthony Towns was a less polished scorer and worse collegiate player, but a far more versatile big man, and leapfrogged Okafor as the top pick in the 2015 NBA draft. The Minnesota Timberwolves chose Towns for his defensive potential and upside as a modern stretch big, while the Los Angeles Lakers, picking second, also passed on Okafor, opting for D'Angelo Russell to embrace a guard-heavy, up-tempo future. Okafor fell to the Philadelphia 76ers at third overall, and it was arguably the worst situation he could have landed in. Philadelphia, deep in the midst of the process, was the NBA's worst team, and already loaded with big men like Nerlens Noel and the injured Joel Embiid. Despite the roster logjam, Okafor was given the keys to the offense and put up respectable rookie numbers, 17.5 points and 7 rebounds per game. He earned all-rookie first-team honors and finished 5th in Rookie of the Year voting. However, his play came in the context of one of the worst teams in NBA history. The Sixers went 10-72 that season, and Okafor's numbers were quickly dismissed as empty stats. His on-off metrics were disastrous, and the glaring holes in his game, poor defense, lack of effort, and inability to adapt to modern offensive schemes became undeniable. Okafor's rookie season would be the high point of his NBA career. Joel Embiid's debut in 2016 immediately made Okafor expendable, as Embiid proved to be a generational talent on both ends of the floor and was really everything that Okafor wasn't. By his second season, Jahlil was already seeing reduced minutes and facing trade rumors. His inability to improve defensively or expand his offensive game to include a reliable jumper or playmaking ability rendered him a liability in the modern NBA. The Sixers eventually benched him entirely, and he was traded to the Brooklyn Nets, where he saw limited minutes. Okafor became a journeyman, bouncing from the Nets to the Pelicans and Pistons, putting up modest numbers. By age 25, Okafor was out of the league, an unthinkable reality for a player who had once been named the future of the center position. His story is a stark reminder of how quickly the NBA can evolve, and how even the most talented players can find themselves left behind if they don't adapt. The weird part about Okafor was that when given minutes, Okafor can certainly be an invaluable piece to your rotation, as he could put up points at a rather efficient rate. But due to the age of analytics, exposing that pick and roll style athletic big men make for way more efficient offenses than post guys that can't pass out of the post, Jahlil, who was really everything that the scouts had expected early in his career, was clearly not a valuable piece in the modern NBA, and was effectively a bust in the league who once again peaked as a rookie. If you made it this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're trying to hit 100K this year. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.